So this is the first of a series of masterclasses. And what I'm going to do is I have the role of UK Government National Recovery Champion, which has been an interesting role for the last 5 years, advising the government about drug and alcohol services, just at a time when we've had massive change. So we've moved from a period of best part of 10 years of austerity, where our services got cut relentlessly, to suddenly a realization that this had gone much too far. And then with the Dame Carol Black reviews and then a new drug strategy, we've got a whole new landscape. And in that process, I've been the person advising the government about how to move things forward. So I'm gonna start by giving you a couple of slides with a brief introduction to the sort of policy background of why we find ourselves where we are now. And then I'm going to hand over to Dave and Larry, who are going to go and who are going to sort of cover the main theme of this particular webinar, which is what is a LERO. So can I just ask everyone to make sure they're on mute before we start, so that we don't get any interruptions. If you have, the other thing to say is, if you have any questions that you want to discuss, you can put them later on in person, but please feel free to put them in the chat as you go along. If you have questions that you want asked, put them in the chat, and I can then put them to Dave and Larry when we get to the end of the presentation. So let me move. Check this. Right, good. That's moving along. So when I talk about this to policymakers, this is the information I usually give them. So I always start presentations by saying that when you think about psychoactive substances, drugs, alcohol, and indeed problematic behaviors, people engage with them across a whole spectrum. So at one end of the spectrum, the left-hand side of this picture, people either don't use at all or use drugs or alcohol in a way that enhances their life. It doesn't cause them any harm at all. Of course, at the other end of the spectrum, you have people who develop really significant problems with drugs or alcohol. So they, in medical terms, they might be said to be drug or alcohol dependent or addicted, whichever term you prefer using. But there's maybe 5% of the population start running into really significant problems with their substances. And in between those two poles, you've got every different variation of that. Perhaps as we move towards the right, people are starting to develop more and more problems. And there's probably about another 30% of people in the UK who are starting to have some form of problem with their alcohol drug use, a physical, psychological, or social problem. If you have that range of ways people can engage with substances, you need a range of ways of responding to that, to helping them. And that's the bit at the bottom of this slide. So we know about treatment. Treatment is where people go when they've tried everything they can and they can't get on top of their substance use. But before that, further upstream, there are other things we can do. So in an ideal world, you'd have early interventions. You'd be able to pick problems up at a much earlier stage and direct people to sources of support. And even further upstream than that, we could be educating people about substances at a very early stage in schools. And we can also support people in with parenting interventions and other ways of supporting their mental health. But the real focus of what we're going to talk about here, and this is what I talk to the policymakers and the government about, is the right-hand blob on the bottom. That's recovery support. So the second slide I always show them when I talk about this is this one. So this is an amalgamation of pretty much every bit of research that's ever been done in the world about addiction and substance use. And what this says is there's a pretty common pattern, but this is an average of all of it. So when someone starts developing a problem, on average, it takes them 4 or 5 years before they even go and seek help, whether that's from a GP, treatment service, fellowship group, other forms of mutual aid. 4 to 5 years on average before you even ask for help. Once you ask for help, it takes on average 8 years for someone with a significant problem to get that problem under control, to get it into remission, such that perhaps they're abstinent from the substance or they've got it completely under control. But here's the key bit. The problem is that the normal outcome once they've finished that episode of treatment is lapse or relapse. 2/3 of people with significant problems will lapse or relapse and very often have to go back to the start and go back into treatment. We know that it takes 5 years of being in recovery, of having the substance use under control, before your risk of going back your risk of lapse drops to the general population risk. And you may have heard, I often say there's a good analogy here that doctors, if they treat you for cancer, they will wait 5 years without the cancer coming back before they tell you you have the all clear, because then your risk of it coming back is back to the general population. And it turns out that addiction is pretty similar to that. So if we have this concept of 5 years of building recovery or stabilizing recovery, we need support to help people do that. And the system, in my opinion, prior to 2019, focused just on the acute helping treatment services get you off the substance, then throw you back into the community to sink or swim. So what I proposed in all my presentations to the government was this. This is the model that came up. And apologies, this is a gross simplification of what really happens, but this is a picture showing you the treatment system. And this is what I would call a recovery orientated system. So unfortunately, it presents someone's journey as like a nice straight line. And of course, it's never like that. And I've only got 2 dimensions to play with, and it's much more 3D if you were really trying to encapsulate it. But what this is trying to show is that on the left-hand side in green, you've got the normal stages of a treatment system. But on the right-hand side, you've got recovery support services. And this is what I was advocating strongly that the government put into the policy documents, that they needed to ensure that there were elements of recovery support that help people build recovery capital to sustain the gains they made in treatment and to get back into functioning, or to perhaps for the first time get into functioning in the real world. And at the heart of that is the lived experience recovery organization and a wider recovery community. And this diagram appeared in the national guidance that we wrote, and this is the sort of OHID or government version of that. So this is saying that what we think is the perfect system in every local authority would be treatment services, recovery support services, and a lived experience recovery organization working together. And the sweet spot is where you have all 3 of those working together, because they all do different parts of the system. They're not in competition. One's not better than the other. They're all needed to really enhance recovery outcomes for everyone in that area. And this was what was enshrined in the new From Harm to Hope drug strategy. So what we're about today is the first of a series of masterclasses that have been commissioned by OHID from the College of Lived Experience Recovery Organisation. So this was a group that started meeting, that David Best and I, you can see us in there, convened in the first few weeks of lockdown in 2020 and has been meeting ever since. And the group has changed quite a bit. Some of the people, everyone in this group gave their time. They were all experienced, lived experience recovery organisation leaders, and they all gave their time for nothing to meet and to develop these ideas. And what you're going to hear about today is the first sort of fruits of our work, which was about developing standards for what a good lived experience recovery organisation would look like. And the reason that was necessary was commissioners in every local authority are now being told, you've got to have a lived experience recovery organisation in your treatment system. And of course, we know that more than half of the local authorities in England don't have a LERO. So we helped OHID to write these guidelines, and you can check these out online. If you search recovery support services and lived experience initiatives, it will come up if you haven't seen them. But this is the government guidance written by me and Laura and Susie in OHID. And this lays out why commissioners should commission recovery support services, why they should commission lived experience initiatives and LEROs, and how they can do that if they don't have that in their system. And so this series of masterclasses will be a whole, well, these are our first 8 that we have planned roughly on a monthly basis. And we're going to start today with a description of what a LERO is and a look at the recovery, at the standards that we developed, the quality standards for LEROs. But we're then going to go on to looking at a whole series of different elements that are helpful if you're in that position of not having a LERO in your area, and how would you start one? How would you build one up from nothing? And we hope that they through co-production, through consultation with our members at our monthly meetings, we've come up with these initial headings. And we're going to be rolling these out, as I say, over the next 8 months. And we're going to record all of them. They'll all be available on the website afterwards if you miss them. And then there'll be further developments after this. Depending on what people feel is missing from this program or what the ideas that come up from it, we're going to then develop a series more and a load of written materials to support them once we finish them. So without further ado, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to hand over to Dave Hyam and Larry Eve, who are going to take us through the first one of these presentations. And if you just give me the nod, I can move your slides along, Dave and Larry, as we go along.
Thanks, Ed.
There we go. Do you want me to keep the slides on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ed. I still can't get over you and David Best in them pictures. You look like pups, little baby pups.
I wonder what's aged us in those years, Dave.
Hello, guys. I'm Dave Hyam. I'm the chief exec of the Warrior Down LERO, a new LERO. I am the founder of the Well Communities, what I was chief exec of, but set up a new LERO. And it's really great to be here. I just can't believe that we've finally got to this space where we're talking about LEROs and helping people to develop LEROs across the UK, because it's took years and years of work. Larry, do you want to introduce yourself, mate?
Yeah, will do. Yeah, morning everyone. Thanks for joining us. It always makes me a bit nervous when Ed introduces me as someone with lots of experience, a very experienced LERO leader, and I think, oh my God, I don't know, I don't feel like that. But what I do feel like is someone that's worked developing a LERO for the last 14 years. Same job, same company, same organisation, committed for the last 14 years. And part of my role now is supporting other little LEROs, grassroots organisations in other parts of the areas where LEROs are developing. So I have a passion for it. I'm not going to consider myself an expert, but just to qualify myself, I'm a person in long-term recovery. I spent about 5 years. It's funny that map that Ed was just showing, because I kind of fitted right into that. Because my first 5 years of treatment, I was in and out. You know, I'd go around, I'd successfully complete, come back, successfully complete, come back. And then for the last 12 years, I was just in. You know, I never made it out again, you know, until I actually made it out again. So, yeah, I kind of identify with that little bit of the map that Ed showed. But hopefully we're going to get something from this session today. And me and Dave are going to present best we can as we go through. As I say, listen, I'm not here as an expert and I don't have, but what I do know is I know what I know, and I know what's been working in the areas where we work. So hopefully it's useful for some of you. Cheers, Dave.
It's amazing how lived experience always have. Like, I'm not an expert, and we have that imposter syndrome, but we know what we know and we know what we're good at. And Larry, you're good at what you do. So and apologies, because I've got a sore throat and coughing, headache and fever. So just bear with me and I'll try and get through this. Ed and Larry has promised to save me and not leave me if it's a brick wall. Do you want to just go on, Ed? So yeah, what we're going to go through is introduction to the standards, the core elements of a LERO, what is not a LERO, and making the case for LEROs across the treatment and recovery system. And then I want to get through these slides so we can have this Q&A, because that's when we'll get into the nitty gritty of this stuff, and we can look each other in the eye instead of just staring at this PowerPoint. Yes, Ed? So introduction to the standards, and I think it's important really to go back to when how these come about, and it was really, well, Ed's just been talking about in terms of when we formed the LERO formed in 2020, when we were asked to come together to really look at and champion lived experience recovery organisations. I've tried to do this, you know, I've been in the game now 20 years, and I tried to do this about 4 or 5 years before we set up the LERO, but we always had that geographical difficulty of getting people all across the country, getting them together and sitting in one room, because we never even had the vision of doing Zoom. So I think with Zoom, it became with the pandemic, it became a perfect storm where, you know, all leaders across the UK come together and we could manage to meet every single week via Zoom and able to shape who we are and what we are. And we wanted to create a set of standards, because I didn't have an identity in my organization at that time. We were just lived experience people looking after people, and we never really had an identity. Yeah, and I don't believe we were really valued of who we are as a lived experience organization. So we wanted to create a set of standards to help small groups and LEROs across the country to really establish themselves and to identify themselves of who we are. And that's when the term lived experience recovery organisations come about. And then we worked on these standards for a few years, and we got support from OED in terms of who we are and the real elements of understanding what a LERO is. And, you know, I'm not going to read from the PowerPoint, but a LERO is governed and led by the people with lived experience. They're the very people who have been through it. They're the very people who have been through every stage of the treatment system, of the prison system, of trying to get well, of living in this stuff. But when we look at lived experience organisations, that what really defines them is the culture and the values of them organizations, because it's them that drive them LEROs and do what they do in the heart of that community. So, you know, just to some of the bullet points there, there's 33 statements and divided into the culture and values, support offers, staff and volunteers, and operations and management. So this would really give you, and as Ed said, there will be a link for these standards for you to go through. But as Ed said, the website is down, but it's getting redesigned. And soon as that's redesigned, we can get it back up. But we've got an email at the end, and we can show you. We can send these out to you. But yeah, so it was really important to these standards to help support, you know, small groups, community groups, providers, commissioners, in terms of how they can help and sustain LEROs and how they can develop LEROs across the UK and in their locality. Because as I said again, you know, drawing on what Orwell is saying, no treatment system is complete without a lived experience recovery organisation. So we're here to help, and getting this money is enabled to help us put this masterclass on and help with the mentors of them LEROs across the UK. Yes, Ed? So what is a LERO? And the definition in terms of the national standards is an independent initiative led and delivered by the people with lived experience, offering direct support to people whose drug and alcohol use is problematic and those who identify as being in recovery. So a LERO is an independent, it has its own structures, it has its own governance. Some LEROs we'll go a bit more in depth in terms of zero to LERO, but some LEROs are just a community group. But it's really important that they are lived experience. The leaders are lived experience, and they are driving it, and they are the vision of it. You know, people come in wherever you are on the treatment system, whether you're a heroin addict or alcohol or cannabis or amphetamines, it doesn't matter what your substance is. We will support because we become a community, and it doesn't really matter where you are on that treatment system on your journey. It's also when people come into LEROs, it's not time bound. It's not we're going to get you to A to B. You become part of something bigger. So the time spent within them LEROs is limited. Is not limited. And we serve the local community and the local residents of that community because we become a part of that community. And I'll go on to maintain the core values of that. Next slide, Ed. What is not a LERO? And I think this is really important. To maintain the core values, we think LEROs should have or inspire and have the following members of the group or providers having lived experience. The provider, such as the group leader, CEO and director, have to have lived experience. because it's not about having all lived experience on delivery, and then you've got some non-lived experience with whoever that person is. They're the ones who are driving it. They're the ones who are creating the vision, the aims. So in order to keep the identity of that LERO, we say the standards that the CEO and the chair director have got to have lived experience, and over 90% of the staff, frontline staff, have got to be lived experience. Some people aim to have that 100%, and that's fantastic if we can achieve that, because I believe the assets that lie within lived experience, we can fill all these roles. And I think more than half of the board of directors or trustees have got to be lived experience. So you can really see what we're trying to achieve here in aim at, that the heart and what's driving this is lived experience. Because as we grow as LEROs, we bring other non-lived experience, there's then starts to be a culture shift or a fight between process, community, and people. And we've got to have the people at the heart of what we do as LEROs. We should not work to a policy. Policies should work to what we do, to support the work we do. I think sometimes in other structures, in other organizations, policy seems to come before, working with that person, and sometimes risk averse. So there's more in terms of what is not a LERO when we look at the recovery support document. In that guidance, it describes any service and support that people with lived experience are involved in delivering or leading our lived experience initiatives. Where a treatment provider employs peer support workers or volunteers, the project or support they offer, they provide are peer delivered. We describe services and support provided by a LERO as peer-led. Thank you, Ed. So, zero, excuse me, guys, I'm just going to have a sip of tea. So, zero to LERO. Me and Ed, I think we were doing a podcast, weren't we, Ed? And I think we come up with this term, zero to LERO. I'm going to give all the credit to Ed because he's adamant. It was his saying. So Ed, that's yours. You can have that zero to LERO. But this is just in terms of how we grow a LERO, and you can start from all different stages. So if you see a peer delivered project, a project including events and groups delivered by peers but led by a treatment provider, or non-peer led service offering direct support to people with problem and drug. Typically, those are in treatment. So, although that's not a LERO in its beginning, that can break off and become a LERO. So, the treatment system could support that peer-led group and support them in terms of developing their identity, their autonomy, their independence, and offer that support. That is fine. When I first started the Well Communities, I was working in the treatment system, and I went to that provider and said, I wanted to set up this project. I didn't even know it was a LERO, but I just wanted to do something in the heart of the community. And I needed support, but unfortunately, that treatment system didn't want to pay me to work on a Saturday, and that was a bolt of lightning for me to really say it really needs to be independent of the treatment system in order for us to create our own aims and how we work. So when I first started off, because I founded the Well and I've founded the Warrior Down, and I'm in two different places with that. So I followed this process. So I just got people, volunteers to help me. I already come up with the name. I already found the building I wanted to use. I had an open day where I brought key people down, and then I'd volunteers to help me support in terms of delivering some of the activities. We didn't know what we was then. I did not know that LERO was going to grow into, an 80 staff to 80 staff and cover, a large geographical area. But my only vision was to support the people, support myself, because I was in recovery and I didn't see nothing in the community. So we were just a community group with no structure. And then when we started to form and started to organise, we then moved on to the constituted but not incorporated LERO. And I asked my partner to be on the board. I asked friends to be on the board. So I got these people on the board. It helped. It enabled me then to open a bank account. So I was able to do that with the support around me. And then as we started to get funds and bids in, and I had to learn on the spot, I had to just learn as we went. It was sort of suck it and see. So then we incorporated and become a community interest company, and that's when we could start bidding for other funds. That's when we could become a subcontract to main treatment providers. But as I've set up the Warrior Down LERO now, I haven't gone through these stages. I haven't been through. I've gone straight to an incorporated LERO because I come now with a lot of assets. I come now with a lot of networks. I come now with a lot of experience. So we don't have to follow these stages. We could just go straight into being incorporated LERO. So the Warrior Down now is an incorporated LERO supporting people across Lancashire and Cumbria. So it doesn't really matter. And also, just one other point is, I was working within the treatment system, so I'm helping set LEROs up elsewhere across the country, and I've supported them. So he was in the same position as me. He works in the treatment system. He's got lived experience, so he wanted to do something. So I said, well, you can do if you take your lanyards off, if you step outside your role and do this independently as your name and not behind the company name, then you can set up a LERO. So it doesn't matter if you work in the system, as long as you're stepping out and taking your lanyards off and you're there as your own identity, you can do that. And of course, that treatment system can help. They can support. Well, why wouldn't we take that support? So there's many ways in terms of growing that LERO. Ed, I need another drink. So we're going to make the case, making the case for LEROs in the current treatment system.
Dave, while you're just having a drink, why don't I just ask Larry to come in to just talk about those last points you've just made? Any comments on that, Larry?
If you want to go back
on this bit.
Yeah, we'll do, Dave. Yeah, thank you. I think probably to qualify myself, I joined the Basement Project. Probably it was already quite an active peer support group in the area where I live, and it was probably already in the informal LERO stage as well. So I guess I've joined the party, the Basement Project, 14 years ago from the informal stage, and I've been, I guess, part of that growth to the incorporated stage. Although it does feel that we sit along all of those sometimes. So there are different elements of what we support and where we go and, and the things we do that perhaps in any one day we could be all of those things, if I'm honest. I don't think we just sit as an incorporated and we operate as an incorporated. If we're taking the lads to football, then maybe we're just a peer delivered project, So I think we can sit across all of those on any given day. And I think that's the beauty of LEROs, and I think Dave mentioned it in the policies. We got these policies, but I just know from personal experience that, I'll put that policy over there and we'll go where the need is. And we'll jump in and we talk about that Warrior Down, treatment services, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. You can have the best treatment service in the world. And there are some really good ones. I've seen some really good ones, and I'm going to be really honest, I've seen some really ones that are really not that great. But at the same time, they deliver services 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And I guess my experience is that recovery don't do 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. In fact, the more problematic times are probably your Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday, all of that stuff. So there's this massive gap that sits outside of statutory provision that needs a plug. And it's my view, and I guess the view of the organisation, the Basement that I work for, is we just don't only provide that plug, we're not just that aftercare service, that's supporting the development and mutual aid, etc. But we're actually in the front door of treatment services as well. And I think that's where the Basement has really evolved. Since COVID, we did some work about, okay, people are coming into treatment, and these are the facts as I see them, and, they're controversial, so I don't want to upset anyone as I go through them, but these are the facts as I see them. if you come into treatment now and you're a brand new, I don't know, treatment naive opiate client, and there's not many coming through now, as we all know, but just say you are, you're coming in and you pitch up and you have your assessment, you have your titration, and here you are, you're on your first bit of script, be that methadone, be it whatever. On average now, the duration you're likely to stay in treatment, and I think Ed alluded to it in one of his slides, you're likely to be around for about 6 years. And of course, we don't say that. Treatment services don't say that to clients as they rock up. Sit down, get comfortable. You're probably going to be on this script for about 6 years. Those conversations are not had. So what we're finding, and we know now that we have got entrenched opiate users, just entrenched, it's sitting in service users, rocking up every 2 weeks, every 4 weeks, every 8 weeks, getting a script and on off they go. And they almost feel like the lost clients, those people that are just out there. And I remember years ago working in partnership with treatment provider, and they created this shared care offer. And it was really good. We could close you to mainstream treatment and put you out into shared care. So we did an evaluation of shared care in some of the areas where we worked. And it transpires that you were more likely to die than exit shared care successfully. So actually what we're doing is creating this parking ground of people in shared care where all they did was just passive recipients of service. Rock up, get me script, rock up, get me script, rock up, get me script, And I'm managing a good life in that, but there was never any aspirations to what that might look like. Set the bar higher. What does that look like? So during COVID, the basement project, we all agreed that we're going to get into the front door. So we're going to put lived experience at the front door of entry into service. So we became part of that assessment process. We became part of that referral process. So just as an example, we created something called the choices intervention. And what that is, as soon as your assessment's completed, your next appointment, your next conversation is with someone with lived experience. And we're talking to you about all these glorious things that are going on in the community, all this peer support access that you can access today. And I think that's what's been the game changer, because in treatment services, if I pitch up and I'll get me assessment, it could be 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. I've seen some services where assessments, there's a waiting list for 10 days. I've seen waiting lists longer than that. So what we have people desperate for help, coming into services, and they get, your initial referral, all your triage stuff. They go, hey, here's a date for your assessment. And that could be any time in the future. And I think from my experience, people fall off that. And we know that the attrition rates are awful. We know that penetration rates into treatment nationally are awful. So there's this massive cohort of people that ask for help at the assessment stage, but never make it into treatment stage. So what the choices call and what this lived experience intervention done, it gave them something to do today. Come to this meeting today. Come to this football today. Come to this cooking class today. Come to whatever it is that the LERO is delivering on that day that's peer delivered. You get an opportunity to come today. And we're quite lucky in Calderdale is that if you come into the treatment service, you come into our building. And I think that's been a massive game changer. So in short, what we did is we bought the building next door, put all those clinics and all that stuff that the treatment service has to have. We put all that in there, and then we became the landlord in our local provider. And overnight, that changed the landscape altogether in terms of what that looks like. So when you walk into a treatment service in Calderdale, and this is really important for me, in terms of there's no cameras on the door, there's no buzzers, there's no security glass, there's no reception area, with a bulletproof glass, and you have to talk through the intercom, you sit there in the waiting room feeling like a patient and you're approached by someone in a lanyard. That doesn't happen in our service at all. So I think in terms of environment, in terms of interventions, we've kind of got in the middle. So we are part of that beginning journey. But I think for me to set out a case, if you like, for a LERO. What makes a good LERO? What are the core elements of a LERO? And I've just made a few notes and I just want to share them with the group today. So I think first, in essence, how do we harness the power of lived experience? What is that? What does that look like? And how do we harness it? Because I've seen so many examples of really good peer support, peer mentors, volunteers, apprentices, whatever you want to call them. I've seen them transition and go and get a job with a treatment provider, and they get trained to look like, sound like, walk like, and talk like treatment staff. And I have seen these really wonderful people that were glowing with this gift of recovery, glowing with this, I want to give back. This is the best thing that's ever happened to me. And within about 3 months, they walk, talk, sound like, and all the interventions are the same as someone that's been working in a treatment service for 25 years. So there is something about that power being diluted and being lost as they transition into that policy world. I'm not slaughtering all treatment services here, even though it might sound like I am. But it does get lost in that corporate model, if you like. So there is something about harnessing the power of lived experience. So I see that as 3 elements. I see that our ability, and I say our because I know there's a lot of people on this meeting with direct lived experience, our ability to build trust. And I know the fellowship speak about the therapeutic value of one addict to another. And for me, that is really real, not from a 12-step perspective, but from a real lived experience perspective. You know, I know that the first person that spoke to me that was in recovery actually changed the course of my direction altogether. We have the ability to build trust in nanoseconds that can take, in a professional interface, can take weeks. I never trusted any of my workers, any of my probation officers, you know, any of my social work. I never trusted any of them. It took a long time for me to even be honest with those. So there's breaks down that barrier straight away. I think another one that really stands out for me is that lived experience folk and LEROs, we can reduce stigma in a second. You know, in our first meeting, the idea that, you know, somehow you're different and somehow we actually have the ability to reduce that stigma. And I know that I felt stigmatized for most of my journey through treatment. And I think probably the most beneficial part of making a case and harnessing the power of lived experience for me is the role models that we produce. You know, we are lived experience. I often say, we do some training here and I often speak to our volunteers and the people that have recently graduated and new in recovery, is that they are the face of recovery in our recovery hubs. You know, when the newcomer comes into our building, they want to be you. They want to be in the group you're in. They want to walk like you. They want to talk like you. So they have this massive gift that they can transmit into other people. I think another element of LERO making a case, not that we need to, but let's make the case anyway, is the tailored person-centered approach that we can have. We are flexible and we are creative. And I think that's the essence of it. You know, we just get it done. You know, there's this, you know, I'll give you an example. I've worked with treatment providers in the past and we wanted to have a recovery day. So what we've done, we've asked some of these active service users, people that were engaging in service at the time, to come and help us make tea. And we had a treatment provider come in and say, whoa, 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 you need to stop that. We need to risk assess this tea urn. Yeah, we need to, and I'm like, hey, we need to risk assess this tea urn because what if some of our clients burn themselves while they're making tea? And I'm like, I don't get it. Another example, we was going to take some active participants of service, and we're going to take them to a game of football. So, yeah, we've got the minibus, jump on board here, and then we get the question, no, you need to stop that. Before we refer our clients, does the minibus driver have a DBS? And you think, I don't know, you just like, what are they expecting is going to happen? So what I do think the massive benefits of a LERO is that we just get it done. We get it done. We sit out in the community. We manage risk in a completely different way. And here's the thing. If you think about serious untoward incidences, if we look at when our provider was at the other end of town in their own little building and how many SUIs that they had on a weekly and a monthly basis, now that it's moved into a recovery space and they are based in a recovery space, in the first year, it's less than half in the first year because the meet, the greet, the environment is completely different. I think as well, cost-effective solutions are really, I mean, we've had to, I know, you know, for the past 14 years, and Ed alluded to it, that there's been this massive austerity. So as the treatment service has been sucked out of it, we've had to become more innovative. We've had to become more creative with the smaller, ever-decreasing pot of money that we've done. And I know it's been, but I actually think that's made a case for us because we have had to be entrepreneurial. We have had to think of new ways of achieving them same outcomes and supporting that same amount of people with less money. And I believe we've done that. And I believe austerity has supported us to sit in a place now where we are, where we can say, do you know what? We made it through there. You know, as some of treatment services outcomes started to drop off, I think we actually, as Rise, I just remember in lockdown, you know, with the methadone prescription, and there was this massive fear that, oh no one can get to their chemist to have methadone every day. So we're going to have to give it to everyone on a weekly basis and everyone's going to overdose and everyone's going to die, you know, you know, there's going to be this whole massive risk. And there was this absolute panic, you know, to give some of these individuals that are accessing service, you know, these weeks of methadone at a time. And guess what? It never happened. It never actually happened. So I do think there's something about us being allowed to deliver cost-effective solutions. I think another element that really stands out for me as well is our ability to bridge the gap in mainstream services. Now, I already spoke about the biggest gap being out of hours, you know, your Saturday, your Sunday, but bridging the gap in between that as well. We would advocate for someone in a way that perhaps Most people won't. We know the system. We understand how it works. We know the pathways. We know the processes. Our people that receive service with us, that are in our services and receiving support, they don't know those pathways. They don't know it. It's not explained to them. And okay, this is the pathway for this. This is the pathway for that. We knows that, and I believe that we use that experience of treatment pathways, access to tier 4 treatment, whatever that is. We used our knowledge of that to navigate people through that swiftly. So I do think that bridging the gap and filling those gaps, and there are lots of them. I mean, we'll all agree. Probably most of the LEROs that are in here today are plugging most of those gaps where they sit and offering support and reaching out into communities where, or local groups that treatment services can't penetrate. Another one for me is advocacy and system change as well. I've been really fortunate with the basement and in Calderdale. We've seen a complete system change. I remember us 14 years ago banging our head against the NHS provided services, and wow, what an institution that is. Trying to just get anything across the line with anything that was commissioned by NHS was an absolute nightmare. I think today we sit here, we have there's some fancy language we call that a family. We are a family as a partnership. And part of that today gives the LERO, we have a seat at that table, and it's a voice. Now, I don't sit at that table. My chief exec who is on this, Michelle, she sits on that table, and we have an equal voice in how money is spent, how budgets are spent, it's an absolute, there's a sense of equality. But I've got to be honest, it's probably took, and Michelle will correct me, it's probably put the best point of 12 years to get to a place where we actually feel like we are really influencing system change. And I guess that's that journey through that LERO stage. And probably the last one for me is, on a personal note, is how when we partner with treatment providers and large organisations, the risk of becoming too personalised and professionalised. And I have seen other LEROs along the way that have teamed up and got in bed, if you like, with some of the bigger treatment providers, and they don't exist today as well. And I don't know if you've ever seen that blobs and squares video. There's that, you start out as a blob, and then you're working with these treatment, and before you know it, you become this square, and you're desperate to be this blob, but you've already turned into a square, and you start looking like and start standing like a square. I think that's the really tough part as a LERO, and that's why, in my experience, that the organisation as a LERO, it has to be led by people who lived experience. It's that driver. It's those, if you like, the directors that are above me, the chief exec that sits above me. I think it's those that continually drive this and continually, I don't know, make sure that the values and the integrity and the autonomy are maintained, because as a worker on the ground floor, it's so easy to get sucked into that, and I start becoming a little bit like that. As I said, I've met others along the way that have perhaps fell by the wayside because they've sided up. There's something about recommissioning, where I put all my eggs in one basket with a provider, it gets recommissioned, they're gone. And I think Ed alluded to it earlier, they're gone. And hey, here I am now out on my own in the wilderness, desperate, hoping that, this new provider, when they come in, they're going to come with me, or I feel obliged to work with them. It's really quite messy. So there is something about sustainability and sitting outside of the treatment. And I think I'll end with this. We have a philosophy, the basement is dig, develop and devolve. And the idea is dig is to come into our area. Let's have a look, what's missing, where are the gaps, how does the ground, where are the assets? And then we develop support mechanisms in that and create, grow mutual aid, grow peer support, and then we give it back. And the idea is, at the end of the day, is that the basement project becomes a small part of that, and it's delivered and owned, and then, in its entirety by the community. And that philosophy underpins us as an organisation. The day we get to the point where we give most of this back, and we have elements of what we give back to the community already here, but that's the end game. I hope that's been some useful. What's the next slide, Ed? Yep, that's your one. That's Dave's one, isn't it?
Okay. So just in terms of you seen the previous slide, but just in terms of making that case for a LERO, nice one, Larry. That was absolutely fantastic. And just to add some points to that in terms of LEROs and what they bring, and the difference between LEROs and treatments, and why we need LEROs, and how it's important, because LEROs bring something the treatment system can't bring. So when I went to treatment, I went to get help. I went for the intervention. I went to get support. I went for a script, and I didn't even go with the perception I could even break free from addiction and crime. But when people come into LEROs, they come into a community. They don't just come for an intervention. They become a part of something. They get meaning and purpose when they become a part of a LERO, because we build relationships. We don't just say we'll only see you in a certain time. And if you don't come within this time slot and you're 10 or 15 minutes late, we won't see you. We will see you whenever you can walk through that door. And we start building relationships with these people. They start becoming our friends. They come on our social media networks. We start to integrate into the community. They start to be a part of something, and that connection gives them meaning and purpose. You know, when we work together like that, and when people come in, we don't just address an addiction, a heroin addiction or an alcohol addiction, because people come in. I have never met anyone who's just come in with a drug addiction. Never. They come in with mental health problems. They come in with, being in the criminal justice system all their life. They come in with alcohol problems. They're full of trauma. They've had adverse childhood experiences. And we can't just isolate each one of these. And that's what LEROs do. We see people as a whole and address them as a whole in terms of their networks and who they are, and building their recovery capital up, linking them in to the mutual aid community so they can build that support and have them relationships. I've had, over the last 2 weeks, I've had messages via Messenger. David, can you help me? I've relapsed. This has happened. David, my son, something's happened to my son. If I was working in a treatment system, they wouldn't be coming in. My phone would be off. No one would be on my social network. But we become a part of the community. And when you look at this slide, when we do interventions within the prison system or within the community, we talk about Larry's just touched on it. How are we going to build this bridge between community and the treatment system or the prison system or the hospitals? Well, where LEROs come in, they don't build a bridge. They bring these worlds together. So the LEROs who are commissioned to work in the prison system, who are commissioned to work in hospitals, in community substance misuse, in mental health centers, they then bring these worlds together. And that LERO then is a part of that recovery community. But we live, we get well, we get sick, and we heal in the wider community. We are employed within that wider community. We pay our taxes. We become citizens. Then we become active citizens. So a LERO's got an ability to bring these worlds together and stop building a bridge. We don't need a bridge, because people fall off and die. When people leave the treatment system, when people leave the prison system before they've got to their own community, they're dead. And if we don't bring these worlds together, we'll keep seeing these fatalities. And then we start to make our communities safer places. When we bring these worlds together, it's safer places not only for people in recovery, but the wider community. Because the people who get well start giving back into that community. Christmas Day, we put a Christmas meal on, invite anyone to come. Christmas Day, people are coming and bringing different things, and we all sit down for a meal on Christmas Day. When there's events going on in the community, in the town centre, the LEROs marshal and volunteer to give back. We put nativity plays on for the kids in the local community. We integrate and become a part of that local community. We're not separate. We don't see LEROs as two separate things. We are one. Because I pay me taxes, I pay me dues, I help my neighbour, I support these things, and that's what we are. We're a part of a wider community, and it becomes a safer place where we can walk about with our heads held high. And it's the drug dealers and the offenders that should be hiding, not people in recovery. We should be flying our banners. We're in recovery and we're proud of it. And that enables us to fertilize that soil where we grow new LEROs, where it becomes healthier places. Because there's one thing my aim is, as a person in recovery who's been through sexual abuse, emotional abuse, witnessing violence, I want to create a safe environment for my children. I want to break that intergenerational chain of addiction. And the book stops with us. The book stops with the LEROs and the people of lived experience to break that chain in order for our children to go up well, because we know 3 or more adverse childhood experiences, they are going to be a vendor, underage sex, to smoke, to start drinking. We have a responsibility in recovery, and that's what a LERO does. It tackles all aims and become entrepreneurial. I never went to school, so I have to think outside the box. I've started a maintenance business, giving people opportunities with the skills they've come in as plasterers, as electricians, and then I'm sitting there waiting for the next person. We need a plumber. We need a plumber. Next minute, someone wants recovery, and they're a plumber, and we had like a little unit. And we got capital money to renovate the building, and people have lived experience done that, because they're very capable of managing and doing things for themselves. We wanted to create job opportunities, so we opened a social supermarket called Well Fed, where we saw stock right across the country. And we saw stock and we put it in the heart of the community and sold it at a reduced price so people can afford, instead of just doing food banks, because we've done food banks where we were giving free food out. Some people on low income wages wouldn't queue for free food, but they'd go and shop normally in this social supermarket. We have it in Lancashire and in Cumbria. It's been a rebranding of Warrior Down now. So LEROs and people of lived experience are very capable. And it's important that we keep our identity, because I was going to mention the blobs and squares, Larry. You mentioned it. It's like when we're working in partnership with treatment providers, we have to be aware of who that LERO is. We don't weaponize the CQC. We don't weaponize our policies in terms of the control. Remember why we're working with LEROs, because they can go to places that we can't. When we worked on the drug-related death, we were investigators and knocking on people's tents and sitting with people when they were homeless on the brink of death. When someone put a notice up they needed help, we didn't go through a process, do this risk assessment, call them in at this certain time. We went where the people were at. And that's what lived experience do. They go where people are at. And we're not saying, and I'm not saying, that lived experience, we need the treatment system. Without the treatment system, we can't have a LERO. Without the LERO, we can't have a treatment system. This is about partnership. This is about working together and utilising each other's assets in order to do that. Next slide. Do you want anything to say on that, Larry?
Dave, I think we're getting a lot of love for the passion and the common sense being spoken on the chat, I can tell you, and that's great. We're coming up to 11. We've got about half an hour left. I think, Dave, what I'd suggest we do is we now open it up to wider discussion and questions. Before I do that, this email address on the screen here, if you want any of the slides immediately or any of the documents that people have talked about, just email Kat, who will open that, is on the call here, and we'll send it straight back to you. Any of those documents that you've heard about today, just drop us an email, ask for them, and I'll put that in the chat as well before the end. So I'm gonna stop sharing so that we can get onto here, and I'm just gonna throw it open to everyone. I mean, I personally, listening to that, what you've just heard, the two things, the passion and the common sense, are exactly why I, as a, you can't get more treatment system than me, consultant psychiatrist in the NHS, and I would absolutely endorse everything that's been said in that I see what moves a lot of people forward is that wider, let's call it common sense, real life stuff that happens in the community. And for no fault of their own, big organizations are getting increasingly caught up in red tape, box ticking, KPIs. This is just the reality of the world. It's not their fault. What we need to make the system complete is this community-based lived experience. And I would do whatever I can to facilitate that happening. And that's what I've taken to the policy level, is to say, can we commission a LERO in each area that can help to do this? So it'd be great to have any comments or questions. If you want to write them in the chat, I'll read them out for you. If you want to stick your hand up, I'll hopefully see you, and we can put them to Dave and to Larry. Or just if you want to make other comments about these issues, things you've heard that you've experienced where you work, questions that you might have that you want answered, anything. So I've got a hand up, Curtis.
Yes, hi. I'm going to be quite honest here, I don't know how to do anything else other than that. Is I've seen LERO bounced about. I didn't really have an idea what it was about. A bit descriptive. Obviously, I've been asked to be involved with it today. I mean, obviously, I can say the thing about the passion that I've seen and heard from here. I mean, I think that's that's quite clear. And I think sometimes people throw around the word passion and stuff, but I was honestly going to say you've clearly demonstrated to me the idea of why most people come into these services, to want to support people and why people want to make a change. So I'm going to really commend you for that. I do have some questions. One, I believe in all the things you said, and I like the idea when you spoke about a shop that had the reduced food, because again, I know that affects a lot of people where they will not go and stand up for the free food, and I know they still struggle without it. So I thought that was an amazing idea. I think everything you're talking about is outside the box. And to be quite honest with you, I think the key thing that you said about community is something that I don't see where I live. And I don't see really much around community. So to be honest with you, I'm more interested to know a lot more about it, because I think anything that's going to build any form of community where I live, and I suppose in most areas, is something that I feel was diminished over the years. So I just want to say that really. That was my only one comment. It's not so much a question. Maybe it's just supportive of what I heard.
Brilliant. Thanks, Curtis. That's excellent. I'll just go through a couple of these and then we'll come back to Dave and Larry. So Jamie, I think you were next, and then Annabelle.
Yeah, thank you, Ed, and thank you, Larry and Dave as well. I'm part of Changing Futures, but also coming from a lived experience, and we've just recently become members of the LERO, our group. And I was just interested in kind of what you were saying, Larry, is around, the NHS treatment. I think what we struggle with, or one of our biggest challenges, is the monopoly of treatment with the NHS and around that, and getting involved in, say, our local combating drugs partnership, and getting on board with that. So I'm just interested, it might have to come outside of this meeting, is about how you went up, how that happened really. I know you said it was a lot, it was over a period of 10 years, and we're probably 2 years in now. But for us, it's more about the strategic kind of hierarchy, and about letting go of the power and that kind of stuff. So awesome stuff. Really enjoyed today. Thank you. You've recharged my batteries, because sometimes it can be a bit of a challenge in a battle when you're quite isolated, working in a big county as Surrey as well. And we really kind of sort of get on board with our third sector. Our third sector did get us, but our statutory kind of, particularly our drug and alcohol, is a massive challenge for us. So yeah, I mean, I don't know whether it's a question or kind of just a bit of a me kind of just offloading my biggest challenge. So
absolutely fine, whichever it is. That's good to hear.
I think it is a bit of a question, and it feels like a bit of both, Jamie, as well, because I think everyone on here will identify with that, you know, rubbing shoulders with some of the bigger corporations, and that's why I'm really glad that I've got our chief exec on here as well, because she is that one that kind of the main interface that does rub that shoulders. And Michelle, are you on? Are you able to give some context to Jamie's question in terms of how, you know, how from the days to where we are now in a short version?
Hi everyone, and thanks Larry and Dave and Ed for hosting this today. I think the first answer that came from Jamie was we were commissioned, but it took 8 years to become commissioned, if I'm honest. So for the first 7 or 8 years of our existence, we were funded externally. I think when we moved to Huddersfield, we got big lottery funding for 5 years. So we were very, very autonomous, and we spent the first 7 or 8 years in battle. And then in 2015, our commissioner was very supportive, and I don't know whether she's the deputy chair of the English Commissioners Group now or the chair. She's somewhere up there anyway, and she would advocate with other commissioners to support LEROs. So that's another route for us as a CLERO to start channeling. But when what she advised us to do was when they went out to tender for the drug and alcohol service and the recovery service, was to go with everyone. We didn't really want to, but with hindsight, it was the right thing to do. And we ended up with somebody we'd never worked with before, so that was interesting. But if I'm being pragmatic, that was how we got our feet under the table in 2015.
I appreciate that, Michelle. So yeah, it's just getting the feet under the table, and I think it's just ongoing. You know, we offer olive branches all the time. We come with a smile. Well, we kind of get that toxicity back at us. Like, yeah, I mean, one thing was we were in a meeting and we were called well-meaning amateurs, and we're the experts, and I'm like, geez, man. So it's frustrating, but what we're coming with now is, again, we're using the oppressive kind of system, the privilege, the stigma. So we're kind of, you know, naming it now, as before we were kind of just sort of, you know, we don't want to upset anybody or anything like that. But it's come to the point now is just naming it in the room and kind of, you know, and going quite sort of, you know, blunt in our kind of terms of challenging that. So again, but yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate that, Michelle. And thank you, Larry, and everyone else.
Annabelle, did you put your hand down?
Oh, hi, Ed. No, my question sort of, thank you very much, everyone. The passion has actually rebooted me this morning from meetings that I've had this week. Actually, I've just been appointed as the Wandsworth and Richmond LERO coordinator. We've just sort of done a both borough-wide sort of survey on LEROs. But my question again was around autonomy. This was originally commissioned by our commissioner, with a view to, on the basis of the survey, whether we're gonna sort of be given some funding to start up a LERO. But my question at that time was about autonomy. I don't know whether I heard you rightly. Did you say that you got some of the money from, was it a capital fund that you started it with? Right.
Yeah, so we got, when we started the well, obviously the same as Michelle, we just went to small funders, local funders, in terms of getting that initial support. Then when we come, you know, a proper regulated organisation, a kick, we applied for capital funding in terms of our housing project. And it was then that we started to then get like contracts with the different providers. But sometimes we were banging and kicking that door, and that's where now we're in a different world, because providers now would welcome you, hopefully across the UK, would welcome a LERO and help to support and look at subcontracting or direct funding, because what we've been looking at, and Ed's been driving this, we're trying to get ring fence funding for lived experience, the organisations, because and I've been in this position, we got commissioned by a provider, but then when the cuts come along and they said, right, you need to save 5%. Who was the first person that got cut? It was the LERO. The LERO was out the door. Even I put a blog on the website about disparities in salaries across the system. So when you look at a LERO, we would then help people to get well. We would support them round the clock, 24/7, working with families and getting them job ready. We would get them job ready. We would give them a job, bearing in mind we could only pay a certain amount. And then once we'd put all that work in, you'd get the treatment provider and saying, I tell you what, I'll give you 8 grand more to come and do that for us. So we would lose that person to them. And then some of the NHS stuff, they would then say, well, I'll give you an extra 5 grand. So the treatment system was then losing them to the
Completely. We used to have the most robust, we called it the service user. We had an autonomous building. We used to get the hard to reach clients, exactly what you said. It was, they trusted us. A lot of the main services, there was nothing for people to do. They were given the script and then wandering around in the streets. There was nothing. We had a building, it was open 7 days a week, 365 days doing groups, everything peer-led, food, quiz nights. It was brilliant. We used to get outreach that used to come out down there. They could find all these really, we used to do Hep C down there, everything. During lockdown, what was the first thing to go was that. And basically all of those clients, and I absolutely hate saying it, but you said it so succinctly, they all died, the majority of them. Now they're seeing and they're squawking, they can't get sort of the staff up there. So they want to do a LERO, which absolutely brilliant. But mine is about, they say there's no closed doors, but there's nothing.
There's many a story like that in terms of where the cuts come, because we were doing recovery support, they cut that, and we were working with drug-related debt, and they cut that. They only cut it because there was a LERO. But what we are seeing and what we need to stop, and what I want to advocate for is the treatment or the NHS trying to do things that they're not skilled at. If you need a lived experience initiative, use a LERO.
Right.
Don't start saying we'll do this and employ a LERO when it's like there's.
But it's the stigma from the NHS to a LERO. Sorry, the gentleman said before something the terminology used against us. I mean, it's like, my God, if anybody can get anything done within the community, it's us. But there are so many doors closed. I mean, listen, we're not even talking about getting anything on the system or EPJS. That's a different thing. It's separate, but there are a lot of sort of closed doors. But it was really, I've got so much from sort of what you said, sort of going forwards, but it is around that autonomy, and
thanks,
really
Annabelle. That's really brilliant. I'm going to bring in a couple more people because we've got, so first one, that was Mark from Kennedy Street, and then Mark Green. So Mark.
Oh yeah, this is brilliant, by the way. I absolutely love it. We're LERO down in Brighton, and absolutely really getting totally what you're saying. And one of the things I find interesting is that we don't get anything from the council, from the NHS at all. We're totally independent, and we kind of like it like that. We can sort of, we think we're really effective. We do what we want, but obviously as funding becomes harder and harder to get, we're quite entrepreneurial. We open a cafe up and stuff like that, but funding becomes harder and harder to get. There's this push for NHS, other providers to commission LEROs and work closer with them. But what do we risk sort of diluting what is our essence of being a LERO by sort of getting into bed, I suppose, with those commissioners? Is there a risk there? What's the sort of balance like? I'm sort of, the money would be great, yeah, but is there some, it's got to sort of work both ways, I suppose. Do we have to adhere to loads and loads of sort of different things that might restrict what we do? I was just sort of putting that out there, really, I suppose. Thanks, it's brilliant.
I would say yes and no. to your question. Yeah, absolutely. Back to the blobs and squares analogy. I think you do, but I think from my experience, it's about compromise as well. You know, it is more about negotiating skills. I think we've got a future masterclass coming up. You know, is how do I develop those skills to be able to sit in that room, to be able to sit in that meeting and make a case for my LERO and make a case for this change of pathway and advocate for a change in the system as well. So I think that's a completely different skill set. And I think that's something that we as a LERO have developed over time. I think, yes, it is an absolute risk, but I do think there is a compromise. So quite often in some of our partnership meetings, you might have to give a little bit to get a little bit. So I just think that's that's the purpose of partnership working anyway. But I come back to the fact that the board, the chief exec, everyone with those with lived experience, I think it's those people that carry those values and those morals and those ethics into those bigger meetings as well. And I think it's that really underpins it. And that's why the LERO standards really emphasize the importance of that. And I think that's been the game changer for us.
Shall I bring Mark Green in now? And then we've got Paul and Jill. So Mark.
Thanks, Ed. Morning, everybody. This is fantastic, isn't it? Been a long time coming, this, and thanks to everybody. It's amazing. I just want to speak a little bit about what is not a LERO and what potentially could be looked at, deemed as predatory behaviour by the big service providers. In York, the main drug and alcohol service contract changed this year in July. It changed from Changing Lives to CGL, Change, Grow, Live. And on that change, us as a LERO got invited to attend what they call their Connecting Communities Forum. That's a monthly meeting. It happened to be yesterday. So I've done July, August, September, October, now November. And never once does LERO get mentioned. Never, not once. I've made a point of doing these meetings. There was an individual at our LERO meeting on Monday. The UK lead for lived experience was actually sat in our LERO meeting, and it's not the first time. And there's nothing wrong with that, is there, necessarily? But yesterday, I called him out because this meeting was going on, and I actually insisted that this was discussed and talked about in their what they call Connecting Communities Forum meeting. And if I hadn't challenged them, they wouldn't have done. And it deeply concerns me. Might be controversial sharing that, but I'll be saying it to the faces when I see them. It concerns us as a very small LERO in York. It concerns us massively that now the biggest service provider in the country is the people we're dealing with. I think Dave and Dave, what was it called, Dave? Bubbles and Squares or something.
Blobs and Squares.
Blobs and Squares.
Google it. It's.
I intend to.
Co-production.
So it's about absolutely. We'll work with anybody, but it's got to be on an equitable basis. And what I've seen so far, it's a bit concerning. But thanks for this. It's great.
Mark, that's a really great comment, and I see Paul's next, who might well have something important to say here. Paul, over to you.
I'm not sure I have it, but I'm just say I've been blown away. I joined late, and Larry was talking, and I was like, wow, fucking hell, what's happened here? This is music to my ears. I've been waiting 40 odd years to hear stuff like this. So I'm a bit blown away by the stuff I've heard from Larry, Dave, everyone. It's fantastic, and it sort of embodies what I believe LEROs are about. I work in Bristol. I don't know how I ended up in a commissioning team in public health, but I did. Christ knows how I got here, but it's where I'm at. And I came through, in and around this world for 40 odd years, either as a person who's used every service there is. I've spent years in various treatment centres, etc. And then I came into this sort of world as in that usual volunteering whatever role, and progressed to be a project worker, support worker. Then I got into what was called service user involvement, and and that was funded. A group here in Bristol where I work was funded by the local authority, and I was employed by the local authority, and it just didn't feel right. There's a couple of people on this call. Richie, how you doing, mate? I haven't seen you for ages. And Ruth, who were pivotal at in those early days. But it didn't really do what it's supposed to do. It doesn't do it. I think the idea was for it to be something like a LERO. It was nothing like a LERO, and I lost the will to live with it, to be honest, as so did a few other people. But to hear this and see this, so some of the things over the years that I've been passionate about and which have frustrated me are, and they've all been touched on to some degree or the other here. So one is this notion of lived experience, call it whatever you want, it's had a million different names. It's one of my fears is it's tokenistic. And it is, because I see in meetings and I experience sometimes tokenism. Yeah. And it's, oh, we've got so-and-so in the room. Oh, we've got, and it's literally that box ticking experience, sort of that really frustrates me. Hierarchical systems being touched on here. Again, something that, you know, we know best. I'm the DPH. I'm whatever, the CEO. We know best. Priorities we've talked about. As soon as there's a bit of a squeeze on funding, the LERO goes. We're being told on one hand, we really want to challenge stigma. What you say, the lived experience, the expertise is fantastic. We really need it. As soon as there's a squeeze on money, see you later. We don't need you. We need the professionals. You know, the governance. We're fucking, Larry, you touched on it, didn't you, about sort of risk and governance and all of that shit that stops us doing so much. You know, we're wheeled out. We get held to account in the same way as some huge NHS trust. It's lunacy. It's absolute lunacy. You know, and it makes it difficult if there are services we want to provide. You know, you have to go through a procurement system. You have to go, all of that sort of stuff. It really makes life difficult for us. Then show us your outcomes. What are our outcomes? Well, we don't report to NDTMS. Yeah. So there's no evidence of what you do. It's no good then. You know, you don't do top swims. You don't do all this bollocks. Excuse my language, but it drives me up the wall. You know, and an acknowledgement of that at some level would really, you know, be a start. Just an acknowledgement of the barriers that we're facing, rather than pretending that we're working alongside people. We're not. We're trying to punch up. That's how it feels to me. What else? I've got a little list of my renting list is here in front of me. You know, I think we touched on funding. But what I will say, so basically a huge power imbalance, it feels to me. There's a huge power imbalance, you know, around the establishment. And I sound like some old hippie that I am, really, don't I? But there's some huge power imbalance going on. And I think the LERO is a fantastic way to challenge that. And I know Ed, I've met with Ed in the past, and, you know, I think he's a brilliant advocate for the sort of work that we do. He gets it. And a lot of people don't get it. They nod to us and they, you know, yeah, oh, it's wonderful. And I hate it. It riles me, you know, they tilt their head a bit. I call them head fucking tilters, because they tilt their head at me like that, you know, as if they really understand. And I think, oh, piss off. So, you know, to be in a room virtually with so many people who really get it and who are really passionate, for me, it's made my day. It's made my week. It's made my year. It's brilliant. And I'll do anything I can to support it or be part of it. End of. Be done.
Thanks very much, Paul. Listen, we've got just under 10 minutes. I want to go to Jill and then to Nikki, and then I want to give Larry and Dave the chance to finish off the session with some comments on that, if that's okay. So, Jill, over to you.
Hi, everyone. To start off with, thanks to Dave and Larry. It's absolutely amazing listening to you two. I've been to the LERO meetings. You're both so generous with your advice, your support, and your pointers to do this. And I work for Derbyshire County Council, and my role is in LERO development, as you know. And it's something we're passionate about doing, and we want to do it right, and we want to listen to all this advice and get using the masterclasses. We're sharing that with all our recovery organisations. It was just a quick sort of, what pointers would you give us to develop that? If we were putting some money into something, what do we avoid? What's, you know, bit of advice, just quickly. I know we're towards the end. And just thanks. It's amazing.
Thanks, Jill. So I'll hold that thought, Larry and Dave, and then I'll just come to Nikki, and then we can draw it together. That's brilliant. Nikki.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, just to reiterate what other people have said, thanks to Dave, Larry, and yourself, Ed, for not just supporting today, for being there over the years as well. I suppose, so I work with Ed, I work in Solihull, so I see how Ed advocates this stuff daily, and really fights our cause as well. And I work within a partnership. Like Larry was saying earlier on, we're fortunate enough. I work in a partnership of 4, and we have 25% of the table. Like, they really listen to us. We're fortunate enough for that to happen. The LERO I did work for went insolvent in December of last year, and a bit like Larry had said, they went from the blob to the square. And what I've tried to do is pick up the pieces, create a new LERO, and try and take it back from the square to the blob. Now, we are fortunate with the partnership that we are in, and I'm always banging on around autonomy, but I feel we only have the autonomy to do what they allow us to do. And with the additional funding that always have given, and the brief that's gone out to local authority about commission services having a LERO in it, do you think we'll ever get to a place where recovery services are commissioned separately to treatment services that allow us to have that full autonomy?
Thanks, Nikki. I would just say, actually, just as I don't know whether anyone from Essex is on the call, but of course, Essex, the model in Essex, they've flipped it round and put the LERO in charge of the whole system. But that's perhaps that's a discussion for another day, perhaps, and we can get them to come along. Those are all brilliant questions. Thank you so much, everyone, for the comments in the chat and the discussion. I'm going to go to Larry first of all, and then to Dave, just to, in the last 6 minutes, just to try and sum up some of those things and answer some of those questions. So over to you, Larry.
Yeah. Thanks, Ed. In terms of answering questions, I think if the suggestion, I don't give advice, but the suggestion I would make to any provider or any, local authority thinking about, I don't know, getting involved with a LERO, commissioning a LERO, whatever it is, I think the first thing I would say was just move out of the way. Just, get out of the way. We're quite capable, if you just let us get on with it. And it's something about the speed of trust. And I know that takes time. And I know where we work, it's took quite a long time to develop that trust. And it's that trust that's propelled us, I guess, because we can do this stuff. So there is something about moving out of the way. But analogy we quite often use here is if your son was using this service and you're a mum or you're a dad, what experience would you want them to have? Who would you want them to be meted by? What would be your wish for them? And if you design your services based on that, what we find is when you look through that lens, it doesn't look like anything it looks like now. Treatment services wouldn't look like what they look like now if a mum and a dad were doing, in terms of entry into service processes, pathways, So I think there is something about changing the lens. We've got this corporate lens that we look through, and we look through the lens of all these policies, and they get in the way. So there's something about taking one eye off of that and looking at it from a really human approach. And I think that's been really useful for us. And we've been able to have conversations that perhaps you wouldn't normally have and find solutions that perhaps don't sit in that corporate world. What I wanted to say as well was just, I think, the massive part, the passion that drives me about working for a LERO and being part of a LERO, and is that it's the needs of the person. It's the person that needs help that come first. We design our services around the needs of the person. And I think where we're not corporate, it isn't a business model that we're driving and we have to have this stuff. It flips that on its head, and the needs of the people that are accessing the services, the newcomer, the people that are broken, the stuff. I think it's underpinned by what do they need as opposed to what does the service need as well. And I do believe that kindness, that charity, that forgiveness, that compassion, that stuff, I think that in itself has propelled us to where we are now. And I just wanted to end on this before I hand over to Dave, is that I've been sitting here thinking about the growth of our LERO, and I'm not here to showcase our LERO, the basement project. It's not that. I think I just wanted to where does it end? What can't a LERO do? And I don't think there is anything. I have this dream, and anyhow, I have a dream that we have an NMP that's been prescribed OST medications. Imagine what that would look like. Would we have a clinical lead that was on methadone for 15 years? Imagine what that would look like. I mean, where we are here, we are the first one, and again, I'm not showcasing what we are, but just in terms of what can a LERO do. So we have on-site dispensing in a recovery hub. So you don't have to stand in a shitty methadone queue if you come into service with us. You can get it in a recovery hub. You know, our first point of call, a detox, our community enhanced detox facility is the first point of detox in Calderdale, and it's delivered by people with lived experience. It's great. You get administered a medication by someone who sat in that detox, you know, 2 or 3 years ago. So I guess it does feel like you're banging against the drum, and it does feel, but I just want to add, you know, that hope to the emerging LEROs and those people that are frustrated, because it is a day that I don't think there's anything we can't do. And I see this as a movement in 5 years' time where we're calling the shots and we flip this stuff on the head, you know, that community first approach. Imagine the environment where you are referred to the LERO, and then if you need clinical care, we'll refer you out. What would that look like? And I'll leave it with that. Over to you, Dave.
Thank you, Larry. Am I off mute? Yeah, I'm off mute. Yeah, so there was a couple of questions there. I heard one about, you know, every man and his dog professing to be in recovery, and it's like, I've been doing this work for over 20 years and trying to promote lived experience and the value of lived experience. And then, as I said earlier on, being able to get set up the LERO and really help and support the development. And, you know, we will see someone coming to the table and saying, I helped my sister's auntie's cousin when she had a drug problem or a drug problem, so I'm in recovery. And we can't police that. We can't police that, but we need to know and keep our own house in order and keep our side of the street clean. We have the standards there to refer to. We have the standards to directors, and then it's up to each local authority to ascertain where they are on that scale. Also, in terms of, you know, what advice when you're looking at a LERO and setting up a LERO, and you know, for me, we're helping in other areas setting up LEROs, and this doesn't happen overnight. Let me tell you, this is not saying, right, get a LERO in 12 months and it's going to be up. This is a slow process, and identifying the key people, because we can come along and say, oh, we've got a policy for this, we've got, you know, here's your constitution, here's this, but that's nothing if you haven't got the relationship and the people there in order to drive it. Why did I start my LERO? Ask that question. Why did I start a LERO? Because my town, my local community had no visible recovery. So I wanted to do something about it. And I bet you in your local area, in your local town, there's someone there who's saying, I want to do something around this. I want to be able to find support for myself and engage with other people. So it's working with them people and helping them to stand up on their own 2 feet in order to get that, getting support wherever you can to help these people in order to do it. Policies and all that, they can come, but it's about working with that individual and getting the values right, getting the aims right, and the reasons why they're doing this in the first place. And also, just in terms of LEROs and when we're working with providers, it's and Larry said, get out the way. It's like, don't be fear driven of what lived experience and what LEROs are capable of. I say I'm a professional with lived experience. My lived experience is there, but it doesn't go before me and minimize my capabilities. So when we look at the work we've done in terms of drug-related death, we identified the treatment system, the provider, the commissioner, the police, the NHS, the hospitals, identified the 10 most likely people to die within the treatment system. And it was a segmentation model of how we come to identify these people, you know, like use alone, previous overdose. And we use lived experience to target these individuals. And we reduced the number of deaths within that area, where we got a national MJ award for the work we done. But they stepped back and allowed the LERO to do what we do, and not being risk averse, not being fear driven, but about working together. And when it's that clinical work, when we need that, you know, that clinical state, we work with that treatment system, the NHS system. So LEROs are capable of doing a lot, and it's opening our minds. Don't let us and our own judgments and stigma get in the way of development of that LERO.
Dave, that's a brilliant sentiment to finish up today. We're a couple of minutes over time, so apologies for that. But just to thank Dave and Larry, the passion was just immense, and thank you all for attending, because it's been great to hear your particular views and the situations. A lot of the themes you've been talking about will be coming up time and time again in these masterclasses, and we hope to pick them off one by one and provide some concrete messages.